We are now reconvening the regularly scheduled board meeting for Thursday, September 27th, 2018. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll ask Ben Chavez to please lead us in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And at this moment, I'm asking everyone to please remain standing, or please stand after the pledge in remembrance of Keontae Michael Aquaya. Thank you. Keontae was a student, for those of you that do not know, at our Yolo High School, and he passed away on Tuesday morning. Our hearts and prayers remain with the family and with Yolo High School. We will now move to roll call. Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez. Here. Kobe Pizzotti. Here. Jackie Wong. Present. And I am present. Thank you. We'll now go into announcement of action taken in closed session. E1, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline, Dismissal, Release. Information received. E2, Government Code 54956.9, D2, Conference with Legal Counsel, Potential Litigation, Discussion held. E3, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Superintendent Evaluation, Information received and direction given. We'll now move to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, President Alcala, we just have a correction on consent agenda. Item M.2, we have a revision to the certificated human resources recommendations, and the new copy is there with the board and for the public to receive. It is the addition of our new Director of Technology.
And I'm sorry, Superintendent Luna, which one was that on the?
M2.
M2, thank you.
M2.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Since there was a motion and a second already, I'll withdraw my second if she would withdraw her first and accept the changes.
Sure, although I think we can also still make the change of the consent agenda, but yes, okay. I will second to pull it.
All right, thank you. So let us now begin with a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved. Thank you. We will now move to communication celebrations. Recognition of Nathan Hill, Transportation Supervisor, Linda Luna, Superintendent.
Thank you, President Alcala, Board of Trustees, staff, and guests. We are making a good practice here to ensure that we celebrate the good work of our employees. At our last meeting, we had our reading specialist who created a new summer program called the Read Vacation or something like that, where students were able to access reading materials and access communications with their teachers over the summer. So at this time, what I'd like to do is introduce you to Nathaniel Hill. And Nate, I'll ask you to come on up. I think Nate's afraid that I'm going to ask him to do the transportation shuffle. Board, I'd like to introduce you to our Director of Transportation Services. And tonight, what we would like to do is recognize Nate for his leadership and efforts in supporting the new contract language for the new Wednesday professional learning time. This new language allows teaching and administrative staff to collaborate every Wednesday afternoon now on behalf of our students. The changes were made to bell schedules and bus transportation schedules both before and after school. Specialized schedules transporting our most needy students were reviewed to ensure students with special needs were not affected by these schedule changes. Changing of schedules also included the incorporation of employee schedules and determining the appropriate routes across the district for all of our students. His leadership and problem solving has brought our district to a better place in allowing this professional learning time on Wednesdays to happen. Another thing that you should know about Nate is his passion for supporting our kids. Nate has served voluntarily as a student mentor on a school campus by monitoring his mentees' progress and support. He is passionate also about wanting to support our African American students as well. Overall, we are grateful and fortunate to have Nate Hill as our Director of Transportation Services. So I wanted to make sure that you knew about all of the things that he had put in place for us to have a good start of school. So thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
So perhaps maybe we can take a picture with the board, and Nate will give you this certificate.
What's the transportation shuffle?
Yeah, what is the transportation shuffle?
So I still have to do that. All right. On three, 1, 2, 3. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. So we will now move on to Student Association reports. Student Board Member Annabella Willis from Yolo High School.
Hi, I am Annabella Diaz, Student Board Member representing Yolo Education Center. Good morning, Board, Cabinet, Student Luna, and guests. YOLO hosted its first parent-guardian meeting this morning at 8:30 a.m., allowing parents to learn more about YOLO and have questions answered about their child's academic progress. We held our second youth leadership meeting on the 25th of September. Students discussed fundraising ideas of senior trip, planned outreach to feed the homeless, and received voter registration training. YOLO held the first huddle of the year on September 20th, which recognized students that have shown improvement in one or more of the following areas: academics, attendance, or behavior, and they were presented with a certificate. On September 7th, we hosted Kevin Bracey for his Each One Reach One assembly. Washington Middle College High School. Principal O'Neill and Counselors Sparks spent last Friday with the team from Sacramento City College learning about new policies and relevant programs at the California Consortium of Early and Middle Colleges. Back to school night last Tuesday was a big success, with tables from SCC families followed their student schedule to meet teachers and learn about curriculum, expectations, and policies in each class. Kevin Bracey began his 2018-19 speaker series in early September. His message and presence was a big hit, thanks to student services for bringing him to schools throughout the district. Upcoming events include the celebration of our freshman class completing their first college unit on October 17th. Also, we're planning our second annual Halloween movie night for for area families to visit classrooms for treats, watch age-appropriate movies, and participate in the costume contest and Day of the Dead activities. It's scheduled for 6 p.m. Thursday, October 25th, so you're all invited to skip the board meeting that night to attend. Stonegate Elementary. Stonegate hosted a dance with Kevin Bracey serving as a DJ. Upcoming events include leadership attending the CADA area middle school leadership conference on October 3rd with help for their wonderful PTO. From Westfield Elementary, Friday, September 14th was our first movie night. 23 families attended to watch Ferdinand. PTO hosted a bake sale Friday, September 21st, and continues to raise money for the school. Farmers Market is open. Farmers Market is up and running. Third annual community dinner dance is happening Friday, September 28th. Bright Career and College Training. Every Thursday, the Bright Garden Cafe will open. Meals are prepared and served by the high school culinary students. Mark your calendar, September 20th, 27th, October 4th, 18th, 25th, on November 1st, 8th, 15th, and 29th. December 6th and 13th. Bright Annual Harvest Festival will take place on Friday, November 2nd from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. River City High School. River City High School has had one of their most successful homecoming rally games and dances. Students won a contest and were able to get KCRE to come and record one of their football games. The first school dance of the year sold out of tickets and drinks, making it one of their most popular dances to date. Athletic Director Jaime King reported the girls' varsity volleyball team has entered into a new regime of coaching, and the players have responded to faster plays and increased volleyball IQ. They are closing the gap with the rest of the league, and their hard work is paying dividends on and off the court. The cross-country team has grown from 48 runners last year to over 60 runners this year. We are excited about the prospects of running in the Metro Conference. Water polo. The water polo season is just getting started. Boys have been to 2 tournaments and girls have been to 1. However, things will heat up with league play starting this week. River City has hosted the first ever Metro League tournament. This new format will invite all Metro teams to River City High School and have water polo be a contest on campus on October 22nd, 23rd, and 25th. We hope the board will come out and support. Girls tennis. River City girls tennis is second and 0 in the Metro League and 10-2 overall in 2018. Seniors Summer, Alex, and Lauren Della Rosa are leading the team along with junior Laura Garcia. Football, the season has not started how we had hoped. However, we feel like we are playing one of the toughest schedules in the region. Our hope is that this tough preseason schedule will prepare up for our league competition. The Raiders will play Monterey Trail this Friday at 5 and 7 p.m. Elkhorn Village Elementary. Elkhorn is working closely with Yolo County Food Bank and offering its first ever kids farmers market. Students in grades TK through 5 are given an opportunity to take home some great locally grown fruits and veggies to share with their families. Southport Elementary. Upcoming events include coffee with the principal on September 28th at 7:30 a.m. through 8:15 a.m. Riverbank Elementary. Leadership teams from Riverbank and Westmore Oaks teamed up as a PLSTs early this year to dive into the work of equity and access. Nicole Anderson provided a full day of training to teacher leaders, and the work continues. Equity Bootcamp was simply the beginning to work Riverbank is setting out to do with site administrators and teachers leaders. They are building capacity. Thank you for your time. Board Cabinet Superintendent Luna and guests.
Thank you, Annabella. Great report. Thank you. Okay, we will now move to item K2, WSTA report. Don Stauffer.
Good evening. So there's been lots of changes this year at Washington Unified. Feedback I'm getting from our educators is mostly positive, but many of us are feeling pretty stressed out right now. I know that some of the stories I'm hearing from teachers, they feel like more and more is being dumped into their laps and they're not feeling like they're getting adequate support. We're working through these little by little and meeting with our ed services folks and with the site administrators, and so hopefully we'll do just fine. It's just going to take a little while, but a lot of it's good. As you know, there were some good changes made this year to our way our schools operate. I've been in contact with CTA about moving forward with an unconscious bias training starting next summer, at the beginning of the school year. So waiting to hear back from them. It's a matter of scheduling, and it's probably going to be some more conversations back and forth on what we want this thing to look like, who's going to be involved, and how to really make it as effective as possible. So I'm looking forward to this process, and so hopefully we'll have more news soon on this. Recycling. It appears that the district doesn't recycle anymore. And I'm kind of disappointed because at the high school, cans and bottles were collected and they were put into a scholarship fund, which amounted to thousands of dollars a year that went into scholarships and other things for kids. And so I'm hoping we can move forward with that again. It was disappointing to see the custodians taking all the recycling we had in our building and then just dumping it into the regular container. It was kind of a sad time. One thing I know I've had informal conversations with a couple of you about, but I think I want to bring it as a formal proposal, is to do what they do in Davis, which the board and the two major associations have 2x2 meetings with the board. And I'd love to move forward with something like that here in West Sacramento, and so offering that as a proposal. And finally, I'm excited to hear about AB 2514. This is a Tony Thurmond bill on dual language immersion programs. And Governor Brown signed that into law yesterday. And I understand there'll be some grant opportunities coming forward. We're waiting for the regulations to be written, so I'm hoping we'll be first in line for those. And before I sit down, I hope to see you at the football game tomorrow. I'm going to be working the chain gang on the side of the field. If you want something to do tomorrow night, come join me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to item K3, CSEA report. Is Mr. Gondar a representative here? No. Okay, very good. So now we will move on to public comments. At this time, members of the public may address the board on topics that are under the jurisdiction of the board and are not on the agenda, although the board by law may not take action at this meeting. The board may limit the total time for public input on any topic to 20 minutes unless it chooses to waive the item limit for a particular item. Individual speakers may be limited to 3 minutes to comment on any topic. Public comments consisting of individual charges, complaints, or derogatory remarks about any district employee are requested to be submitted in writing to the administration in accordance with the district's complaint procedure. We do recognize that for a lot of people, commenting before the board and the audience and the people watching at home on television is a nerve-wracking experience. So to try to make that as easy as possible, we do ask that there not be any applause or booing or catcalling or other demonstrations to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. The board respects the right of members of the public to speak to us regarding matters on the agenda and other matters within the jurisdiction of the board. However, it is important for members of the public to recognize that comments regarding students, other than the speaker's own children, made during a public board meeting may be legally actionable as a violation of student privacy. Both state and federal law prohibit the board and others from discussing confidential student information in open session. To this end, be advised that if you reference a student's name other than your own student, you will be out of order, and your comments may not be protected by the privileges that protect public speech. You could be found liable for such comments in legal proceedings. Furthermore, it's important for the public to understand that negative or derogatory comments made against district employees or others, even those made in public board meetings, could be actionable civil defamation. As such, the board reminds the public that the district has existing board policy that allows the public to lodge a complaint against a district employee. This policy provides a comprehensive procedure for reviewing and responding to public comments. This process provides a more thorough opportunity to be heard than is allowed under the open meeting law that governs this meeting. And we do have public comments this evening. I begin with Laura Jameson.
Good evening. Before I do my comment, actually, I want to say I agree with Dawn. I was a little shocked when I realized that my kid's school does not recycle, and as a big environmentalist, I'm not very happy about that, so I'd love to see recycling implemented at the schools. So thank you, Dawn. What I wanted to talk about today is something that was brought up at a city council meeting last week. It is, and it's going to be on the 2x2 meeting agenda for next week. And I just wanted to talk to all 4 board members and have it actually broadcast and recorded, since the 2x2 meetings are not recorded. So there's going to be an agreement between the city and the school district for the home run program. And as part of the home run program, the city wants to collect data on students. And it's going to be data on students' GPAs, the high school or colleges that they apply to, their SAT scores. It's lots of information. And as I'm reading the agreement, that data is still going to be collected on students that finish a preschool and then go to a district kindergarten. Even if the parents opt to not participate in the home run program, the students' data will still be collected. And I have, as a kind of a big privacy advocate, I have a big problem with that. I understand that the city is going to need some information to see if the home run program is successful, but my recommendation is that the school district does that analysis and then give the results to the city. I'm sorry, I worry about the safety of that data getting out. The city should not need to know SAT scores and GPAs, schools that we apply to, that the kids apply to. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Mike Soto.
Good evening, everybody on the board. My name is Mike Soto. I'm a representative of Rotary International, and I want to talk to you guys about a program we've been working on for the last 3 years in conjunction with 3 strands. I know I had some conversations with Director Wong earlier. This is merely for your consumption to let you know where we are with this. Ashley Bryant is an executive director of 3 strands. Rotary raises money. We're good at that. Ashley is good at what she does, preventing human trafficking. So she recently had a meeting with a steering committee for Yolo County, CSEC steering committee, and that's comprised of district attorney, the sheriff, any stakeholder in this effort, anybody, up and down the state. She has developed a program that will satisfy the requirements of AB 1220. That's brand new this year. We initially wanted to go talk to the students ourselves, and I guess it was decided that the teachers know their kids best. So this is a training for the teachers that will satisfy those requirements. And the beauty of this training, it's on us. So no money out of the district. We have raised over $400,000. This is the first part of the PROTECT program, which is called Prevention Organized to Educate Children on Trafficking. Big problem. up and down the state on this I-5 corridor. Big problem. I'm a product of these schools. I have 2 godchildren in these schools, Elkhorn Village. These kids are tough and they're smart, but these are different times with social media. These are different times. People out there looking for acceptance and they find it in the wrong place. So I just want to let you know where I am and our effort, who I am, and I will be getting this information to you as we progress down this path. We've worked on the protocol with the steering committee. They made some changes. There'll be more changes. We just have a draft. That will be coming forward. Currently, we are in 32 of the 58 counties in the state. So again, this is not a fly-by-night effort. This has been in planning for 3 or 4 years. We intend to see this through and get the word out. So if you have any questions of me, I'll leave my contact information. Anything that I get produced that's ready for you, I will send it to you. Anybody that wants that. And I know Director Wong, and she has some experience in this from Oakland, right?
20 years.
Very, very dear to my heart. This is like eradicating polio, which we're working on also. So any questions, don't hesitate to call me, and I will make information available to you as soon as I get it. Again, this will satisfy AB 1220, and it's on us.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Just want to remind everyone of a 3-minute time limit. When you hear that little ring, it lets you know that your time has expired. Thank you. Danny Langford.
Good evening, everyone. I wasn't able to be here before you went into closed session to make my comments about the superintendent evaluation being on the closed session agenda. And while I'm fully aware of the superintendent's contract and the new language you guys had written into it, I do want to continue to go on the record because I still think it's a Brown Act violation to go behind closed doors and have any discussions with the superintendent outside of the purview of the public. And I want that to be on the record, please. I would have asked before you went into closed session, are you using the written criteria that your bylaws call for when you call it a superintendent evaluation? Regardless of what the language is, that is in your own bylaws. Also, I have yet to see the minutes from the special facilities meeting that was held on April 5th. I'm curious about that. And lastly, I want to agree with the comments made about the recycling program. When Herb Yip and his wife retired from that, it left a void, I realize, and they were very passionate about it. Not a recycling thing got away from our school, away from the high school. And it served so many purposes for so many scholarships and things for the kids graduating. So I would love to see that at every one of our schools. Why not use it as not only a scholarship opportunity, but a fundraiser opportunity for the different classes or whatever, especially your junior high and high school students. So good job bringing that up tonight, Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you. Damian Horning?
Harmony.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. My grandma says it wrong, too.
Okay.
Good evening. My name's Damian Harmony. I'm a parent of 2 children in Washington Unified School District, both elementary school children. We stayed in this district because of the excellent teaching that I saw at Bridgeway Island. I teach in a district that across the river that allowed me to have 1 day of paternity leave for each child. Then I had to take an emergency day. That got me a total of 2 days with my children when they were born. Then I burned all my sick days. So that got me to 12 days. That was a tiring time. And then I had no time to fall back on. But those days were important, so I made it work. You can imagine the difficulty and the burnout that engenders for new parent teachers. This district has married teachers, some of whom are expected, some of whom are married to each other and expecting. So this is kind of a time-sensitive manner, and I hope you address it in a timely manner. I was looking back, and AB 375 says indeed that one spouse or parent gets to leave if you have married parents in the same district. Currently, because they teach in the same district, they would have to pick who gets the bonding leave, the 12-week bonding leave. This is a leave that is allowed to all teachers who have spouses or co-parents who work outside of the district, and there would be no problem getting that leave. But because they happen to teach in the same district and have invested in this district, they are being forced to choose who gets the bonding leave. I guess what I'm here to say is, what do you want from your teachers beyond the hours that they already work for free to tend to my children? How about giving them a free chance to tend to theirs? And it's not a free chance. They pay for it. They pay for the sub with differential pay. You can do it differently. AB 375, pardon me, sets a bare minimum. And I'm not a big fan, as a teacher, of anybody ever doing the bare minimum. The bare minimum gets you through. It gets you a D. It gets you past. It doesn't get you to where you need to go. I hear there's an election coming up. I hear there's a redistricting coming up. And I hear that this is maybe the last at-large election. I'm fairly vocal with who I support. I'm fairly vocal with the issues that I vote on. And I have a lot of neighbors who can't get me to shut up. So I guess my question is, who wants my vote? Because I'm going to vote for who takes care of the teachers who take care of my children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more? Okay, very good. So we will now move on to the consent agenda. Are there any changes to the consent agenda before we approve the whole consent agenda? Okay, then may I get a...
No, I'll just make the motion that with the changes that superintendent already made
Okay.
to accept the consent agenda.
Okay, so
I'll
we have a
second.
motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously approved. Okay.
M1.
Oh, okay. We have a comment on M1. Danny Langford. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will now open public hearing, N1, public hearing, sufficiency of instructional materials, Williams Act, Amber Lee, Assistant Superintendent, Educational Services.
Good evening, President Alcala, Board of Trustees, Cabinet, and guests. The Williams Act Education Code requires that all districts hold a public hearing by the 8th week of school to make a determination through a resolution that every pupil has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials in the 4 core areas. The governing board must also make a written determination as to whether there are sufficient health and foreign language textbooks for every pupil enrolled and the availability of science laboratory equipment for grades 9 through 12. After conducting our Williams inspection, we request approval with regard to the sufficiency of materials. We are certifying that all students have adequate textbooks and materials for instruction.
Okay. I move. Okay. I move. Do I get a second?
Oh, it's just a hearing. Sorry, no, it's just a hearing.
I'm sorry, were there any
Sorry.
comments? I'm sorry, Sarah.
No. So
Trustee-
close.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor?
No vote.
No vote, there's no vote. This is, I'm
Close the
sorry, a
hearing.
public hearing.
Close the hearing.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the hearing. All right, N2, we are now opening the hearing for public hearing, input on draft trustee area boundary maps, William Tunick, legal counsel. Thank you.
And you have 5 comments.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board. Once again, William Tunick with Dennis Walliver Kelly here to speak with you regarding the trustee area process. As I did last time, if it pleases the board, I was going to just walk through the presentation. This is actually the demographer put together. Give a little bit of background sort of on the process, how the board got where they are, sort of where you are in that process. And then actually tonight, in the past, we've had the demographer on the phone, and we do have them available again. Again, if it pleases the board, my thought was to have them available for the discussion item, which is agendized later on in this meeting. So with that, I will, oops, the clicker works, I'll get started. Or we can work with that slide. There we go. Okay, oh good, we can at least get to that one. So, Just real brief background again, because I know the board's obviously heard the background, but for the members of the public who may have not heard my spiel previously, the kind of the background here is you have a state law called the California Voting Rights Act, or the CVRA. It applies to all local agencies, and essentially what it says is that certain types of election systems might be found by a court to be illegal depending on certain factors having to do with how members of the community vote and patterns of voting in that community. And specifically what it really, the differentiation is between two types of elections. There's what we call at-large elections, which is what the board currently has, and those are elections in which all members of a school, or all the voters in a school district vote for all members of the board. So in some years, they vote for 3 members, in some years, they vote for 2 members, but they vote every 2 years. Everybody votes, and anyone in the district can run to be on any seat on the board. The opposite of that, or not the opposite, but the other option is what are called by trustee area elections. And what those are is those are elections sort of more akin to your House of Representative type elections, in that as a voter in California, you don't vote for all your members of the House of Representative. You vote for a candidate who lives in your House district, and only the voters in that district vote for that member. So the same thing would apply to school board, in that you would have a map, and this is what we'll be talking about in a little bit, which divides the district into 5 trustee areas. And in order, each of those trustee areas would be linked to a seat on the board, and in order to be able to run for that seat on the board, the candidate would have to live within that area, and only the voters in that area would vote on that one candidate, which means a couple of things. One thing, you're only voting for one person, and secondly, we just skipped to the next, we're technical issues. And secondly, voters are going to only vote every 4 years. Which will be a change, right? So those are 2 big differences. Without getting into a lot of the theory, the idea is that at-large elections can, as in the way that they function, allow a majority group that votes together to essentially always prevail in an election over a minority group that may be voting in a different way. And by changing from at-large to trustee area elections, in theory, that will allow minority groups or groups that are around the majority to elect or influence the outcome of board elections. And so that's sort of, again, the background of how we all get here. What the law actually says isn't necessarily that boards shall make the transition by a certain date. The legislature could have said by 2020 all boards will do this, or by 2022. They didn't say that. Instead, what it says is if there are certain factors present in voting patterns, essentially, that those at-large elections may be considered illegal, and someone can go to court and ask a court to find those elections illegal and force the district essentially to change how those elections are held going forward. What the law also says, and again, I will get to how we get here from there, is that if someone believes that there's an alleged violation of the CVRA, that if they were to go to court, a court would order this remedy, they first have to send a letter to the district, or it could also be a city or county special district, indicating the allegation, and allow the district time, and there's certain time frames in the statute, to make the change. I don't know if voluntarily is the word, but on its own terms under that timeline, as opposed to going to court and doing it through a settlement agreement or dealing with the courts. And so the district did receive a letter to that effect earlier this year, and followed that by adopting a resolution, and this was, again, pursuant to the statutory procedure, but a resolution saying that the board intended to make this transition and laid out a process for doing so. And what's up on this slide is essentially what that process has looked like. And you can see where this started back in, really it started before June, it started in May of this year. You've had, I think, 4 community workshops at this point, and 6, this will be the 6th public hearing on this process. The first 2 you actually have to do before you have maps, and then the 4 you've had since then have been with the maps that you've had. And I'll talk a little bit at the end about sort of what the next steps would be. However, where you can see we're bolded is the September 27th meeting, that is tonight, obviously. Was scheduled for the adoption of a resolution, which is the other item that's on your agenda tonight. And maybe actually I'll talk about it here. What that resolution is it's a resolution proposing, essentially, the adoption of a by-trustee area election system, so it changes the type of elections from at-large to by-trustee areas. And then also attached to that would be a map of the trustee area boundaries. And right now there's 4 options before the board. when that resolution is adopted, that then, what the education code says is that then goes to the County Committee on School District Organization, which is a county level body, and they are asked to hold the hearing in the district and either approve or deny the proposal. And then beyond that, there's one further step, which I know we talked about a little bit last time, which is what the education code says, by its terms, is that the approval of the county committee of the proposal, so we now go board, county committee, that next step is it automatically becomes an election that goes to the voters at the next board election. That's what the education code says. In reality, of the nearly probably 150 to 200 school districts that have now gone through this process, for a variety of reasons, all of those school districts, I believe all of them, have chosen to ask the State Board of Education to waive that requirement. The election requirement's actually in the education code and can be waived by the State Board, and the State Board has waived that requirement in all of those cases. So essentially that has become the last step in the process, or the county committee approval really has become the last step. So that's sort of once you get past adopting a resolution, what the next steps would look like potentially, but those would be things that we would talk about really after we have a resolution and direction on the maps. This next slide, which I've talked about a few times before, talks a little bit about the criteria that the demographers use in putting together the maps. So at the very beginning of this process, the board went through an RFP, selected a demographer who's done this for probably, well, maybe hundreds of school districts, but definitely hundreds of agencies in the state of California. The demographer, Dr. Doug Johnson, came and gave this presentation, actually talked a little bit about the criteria, both the required ones, which are under federal law, as well as sort of the other traditional criteria that the courts indicate are supposed to, or should be used by boards and demographers in drawing maps. So that's really what this list is. I think a lot of those things we've talked a little bit about previously. So where does that sort of get you at the end? There are, as I mentioned before, there's 4 maps that are currently, 4 options, I guess, that are currently before the board. Oh, there goes the remote again. The green, let's see, green, orange, there you go, and purple, I think. Yeah, those were the 3 that have been before the board and the public, I think, for probably close to 3 months at this point, at least since the beginning of July, I believe. And there's a little bit of information on each one of those. And then at the last board meeting, there was board direction to come up with an additional map, which is, oh, and I'm going to go right past it, which is now the yellow map. So this one was published, I think, a week ago, Tuesday, I believe, right before the community forum last Wednesday. Am I doing something wrong? I think it's working now. I'm sorry. Oh, you're doing it. Okay. Here I thought I had all the control, but it turns out it's happening over there. And I never have control, yeah. So in any event, this is the yellow map, which was the last one, like I said, the revision that was directed from the board last month. So as I noted before, I think that's the end of this presentation. You do have on as a separate item the resolution itself, because the statute requires a public hearing at the same meeting that it's adopted. So you have the public hearing agendized as this item. And then I will come back up and do a short presentation on the resolution itself when that item comes back up later on in the meeting, unless there's any questions right now.
Okay, very good. So,
Just say,
Mr.
should we-
Trustee Pizzotti? Yes,
I was just going to ask a quick question, as to should we save discussion for the later,
after public comment.
after comment? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we're.
Thank you.
We'll call you right back up, I'm sure. Okay, first, Laura Jamison.
Hi, good evening. Hi. You guys do not have an easy choice tonight, so good luck. I think my recommendation is the green one, and here's why. I watched the video for the last school board meeting, and there was discussion of what schools are split up into 3 trustee areas, and I thought, that kind of makes sense as a good criteria, and I think the yellow, orange, and purple, all 3 of those have at least 1 or 2 schools, and each of those include Bridgeway Island as being a school that has 3 trustee areas. The green map, if I'm correct, Westmore Oaks is the only school that is in 3 trustee areas, and just if we're going to have a school that could have 3 trustees, to be fair, it should not be a school in the south part of the city. So I think my recommendation just on that basis is the green map. 2 other items while I'm up here. When I was watching the meeting last week, there was discussion, and I think I heard it right, that one of the criteria that the board gave to the demographer was to consider the residents, your locations of your residents. Okay, that's what I heard on the video last week, and if that's the case, that should not be the case for the next time we do this. So I hope that doesn't happen next time if it actually happened. And the third item is during last week's meeting, and was mentioned tonight, is there's a discussion of, should this go to the voters? My recommendation, at least for this time, is to not, just because we're going to only have one election using this map. And I think maybe having one election where people actually finally realize we have districts, they can get used to it, and then maybe for the next election, then we can have the voters vote on the maps. So my recommendation for this one is to not have the voters approve it this time. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Carlos. Okay, Carlos Alcala.
I've been to all of the hearings. Oh, hello to all of you, by the way. I've been to all of the hearings and heard a lot of people talk and give their comments about the different maps. When I saw the first 3 maps, I thought the green map, I agree with Ms. Jamison, is the best map. Then I saw the yellow map, and I'm personally torn between the yellow map and the green map. I think I personally favor the green map, but I do like the yellow map very much, and I thank Trustee Wong for bringing that up, having a map without consideration to the residences of the trustees. But I still nonetheless believe that I've been going back and forth, by the way. I've liked the green map sometimes the yellow map. But I think I could live with either one of them. I think they're both good maps, and I don't envy you having to make the choice tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you. Danny Langford.
Hi again. So first of all, in pulling out the demographer's proposal that I saved, that I had in my little notebook I bring with me, it did say there was supposed to be 4 in-person meetings from the demographers that we hired, and I don't understand why we did not have them. Being on a telephone in the middle of the room is just not the same thing, in my opinion. Also, when it comes to the maps, I do appreciate that you took another look without looking at anybody's addresses. I think that's more fair in the scheme of things. And I personally lean towards the yellow map just because it looks like it has the most fair distribution of the kids. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Manuela Melbourne.
Good evening. I would also, my name is Manuela Melbourne, and I also agree that I favor the yellow map. I'm also here on behalf of Maria Grijalva, who wishes to thank Jackie Wong for her tireless and dedicated work here with this. And Maria can't be here because she serves for the NAMI and she has a meeting tonight, but she also favors the 4th and yellow map. That's correct, right? Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Rafferty.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you on, I think your process has been a model, and you've succeeded at engaging the community, which some districts have a hard time doing. I think you've gotten a fair amount of input. I think one thing that has kind of put your stamp on this is there's been a feedback from the community. They don't want you to consider the locations of the incumbents, and that's something that the yellow map respects, and I think that's a great attribute. Of course, no map is perfect, and I think the criticism that the Yellow map winds up having one school in 3 different districts, and it's not a school that's been underrepresented in the past. That's not ideal. I would, frankly, in deciding between those 2 maps, sort of defer to the residents of Bright and Broderick as to whether they prefer the delineation between District 1 and District 2 in the green map or the yellow map. I think that would be an important factor. But they're both good choices. I do want to address this issue of of taking to the people. I think it's really not a useful exercise. In this community, it seems like everybody's coming together, so it probably would not be divisive. It often is divisive in other contexts. It does cost money, and if you have a special election, it's kind of a lot of money. So I think that's a negative, and you obviously can't get on the ballot for November. So I would definitely take advantage of the waiver. There's one district that has not. I was involved in that. They wound up having to get a court order to undo their decision not to seek a waiver. So I think you should seek a waiver. You won't get on the state board agenda for November, but they have a meeting on January 9th and 10th. My expectation had been that you would then go to the county committee. I think the county committee is going to be well disposed to these maps, and that would be kind of the end of the process then. Your lawyer suggested maybe you can do the county committee first, and as long as that doesn't result in calling an election, that would be fine too. But I just want to, I think even those who've had doubts will come to embrace this. I think it's become more and more popular with this community, and in general, I think people get very comfortable having their own person on the board. Some of it's from their neighborhoods. So I congratulate you. I think I've learned some things about how you've done this process that I hope to take other places. You've done a good job. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Martha Guerrero.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. I want to thank you all for all the work you've put into considering the districting. I think it is important to have each district have a board member that is held accountable for those particular district needs. And that way they are able to reach a board member and address those issues. And looking at the process, I feel that, I know it always is challenging to bring parents and teachers and interested constituents to be engaged. So seeing that, I've been a commissioner and board member many times here in the city, and it would be pretty empty for most of those meetings. So I understand that it's really hard to bring folks to come in to listen to very important issues, but we're working and but very much interested, and want to make sure that we do what we can, because our city is growing. It's going to continue to grow. We're going to have 6,000 new homes, and we definitely want to make sure that we have some districting and establish that at the earliest time possible. And so you making that decision and moving forward, I think, is the best approach. I think that, some of the recommendations that have been provided here tonight by the speakers, Ms. Jameson and Ms. Langford and Ms. Malborn and Ms. Grijalva, I appreciate their input as well, because they've been really engaged in a lot of other matters in the city. So between, the green and the yellow, I appreciate that it takes a look at, the broader issues, not specifically where the board members live. So I think that's a very good recommendation that you provided. And all your board members are doing a great job. So, just want to, applaud for the work you've done, the dedication, and looking forward to seeing the outcome on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Irene Eklund.
Good evening. I emailed you all today. I hope you got my email. I know, Kobe, I don't have your email, and you have me blocked on Facebook, so you probably didn't get my email. I want to support the yellow map. And I've heard several issues about the other maps, the green map being the preferred map because 3 elementary schools. But what about the high school? We have 1 high school. Every board member could have a high schooler. And to me, it's not an issue. And I think that the yellow map, to me, is the only fair map for the entire community. And I have to agree with Danny, because she just showed me the contract that you all signed for the demographer, and he said he would be here for 4 meetings in person. And having him on the phone for these hearings and having him on the phone for tonight or her, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but I feel like we got shortchanged on that. So that's just my opinion. I support the yellow map. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, so, Mr. No?
Close hearing.
Okay, so we're going to close the, one.
Yeah, I probably put the wrong number down.
Oh, okay, so, okay, Pat Flint.
I'm sorry.
This is a public hearing, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I am supporting the yellow map as well, but I'm disappointed that at the meetings I attended that the demographer wasn't there. Because, number one, I want to know what he based his demography on. Was it population? Was it schools? Was it school board members? And I would like to see, along with this yellow map, what the student population is within there, and is there a school or 2 schools or 3 schools within each of those areas? So I wanted a little more detail, and I'm sorry we did not get more detail for that. But I am supporting the yellow map. The green map is real close second. So I just want to give you my opinion, and I'm sorry if I wrote down the wrong number.
It's all right, thank you. Mr. Tunick, where are you? Oh, there you are, I'm sorry. Could you come forward in case anyone has any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Tunick, I was just wondering, you've heard some of the comments made by the community, especially as it comes to, like Ms. Flint's last question as to what were the criteria used for coming up with a map. I don't know if you have this piece of material right here. It has the items listed in there, but maybe you can express, Mr. Tunick, what some of those traditional criteria means, because we have the laws, we have the federal election laws criteria, and that's what we get. You know, traditional criteria are the things the court decided, right? Can you explain that process a little bit? So I think that might answer Ms. Flint's questions a little bit.
Sure, definitely. And actually, I take one quick moment to talk about the the legal criteria as well, because I think there was a question about that, which is as far as the equal population piece and what numbers do we use, because especially with school districts, usually when school districts are looking at, for example, attendance areas, you're going to be looking at student population numbers. And for this process, we're not looking at that. And we're actually not looking at registered voters or eligible voters. We're looking at total population. And essentially, that has to be at a maximum, a 10% deviation between areas. So you can't have one area that's 5% over the average and one that's more than 5% below the average. You really want it even closer than that. All of these are within that. And on top of that, the other complication, and sometimes where you'll see, I'm trying to think, there was an example, I think, on the yellow map even, you'll see kind of some funny looking shapes. Yeah, a little bit of that going on. Part of what that is the demographers have to use, thank you, have to use census blocks and census tracts when they do some of these things, and the census tracts don't always look like you think they would look. And so that's why you'll see, I think, like up where the railroad crossing up there, you'll see this kind of a funny looking, yeah, that thing going on. So that is part of it. That's definitely there. The Federal Voting Rights Act, that is the requirements when it comes to use of race, and also, I mean, both in that if there is a ability to draw a trustee area that has a majority minority population, which there is not in your district, but if there was, that's something the law would require on the kind of hand in hand with that. And I think last time the demographer talked about in the think it was in Stonegate in the Southport area. That's where, it actually talks about here a little bit, the highest concentration of the Asian American population is. And that's something that when the demographer looks at the map, legally, they cannot essentially split or try to crack, is the term that's used in redistricting, that minority group into, or that protected class, I should say, into more than one trustee area. So they're looking at the equal population, where these different, to the extent there's concentrations of different protected classes are, and then no racial gerrymandering kind of goes along with that as far as what I just said is on the splitting. So then, after you get through that entire process, then there's the traditional criteria, and this is what I think when Dr. Johnson was here the first time and gave his presentation. Actually, I think he's been here twice and gave that presentation. But in any event, talked about the traditional criteria. So there's a couple easy ones on here: compact, contiguous, visible, natural, and man-made boundaries. So, for example, obviously freeways, railroads, canals, streets, all of those things are easy places to draw lines. Usually they'll go along with the census blocks as well. So you can see a lot of that being used in these maps. The other two things which are a little bit more difficult, one which I know came up already, was the respect for voters' wishes and as far as who the current incumbent members are. And just to kind of explain a little bit about that, I think what the courts have said about that is it's perfectly legal for the current location of current trustees to be used in drawing maps. It's not required, but it's also legal as long as that's not the primary factor. And the reason what the courts have said about that is that otherwise what you could have is you could very well have 4 board members who don't like the 5th board member and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to adopt a map that draws that 5th board member into somebody else's district so they can't run again. And what the courts have said is that shouldn't be the role of the board. That should be, if the voters want that person no longer to be on the board, the voters can decide that person has to be on the board. That said, different agencies do it differently. So it's not a requirement one way or the other, but it is legally allowed. The other big one is communities of interest. And this means a lot of different things depending on your community, not to use the term to define itself. The easiest one when we talk about communities of interest for school districts is attendance boundaries. And so that's why I think on all of these maps you have in this case, the green hatched lines are the attendance boundaries for each of the different schools, I believe. And so that's something that I think there was direction at the last board meeting as far as how to use those when drawing these maps. And I think actually the idea was to try to, split as many as possible. I could be wrong. I think it depended on which one. Board Member Wong, I think, gave some direction on that. But in any event, so that's a good example of community interest. I know the other one that came up was mobile home parks. We talked a little bit about that in one of the meetings. The gated community was another one. There can be all kinds of different things. That's really a place where I think the demographers look to the board for direction on what a community of interest is, because a demographer can look at a map like this and see where the railroads are in the streets and that type of thing. They're not going to be as easily able to pick up those communities of interest. So those are kind of all the factors that they use, and I think what the demographers tried to do in drafting these maps was to come up with sort of 3 variations, and now really 4, that meet the basic legal criteria or otherwise based on the traditional criteria, but the difference is which one of those criteria is weighed more heavily. And I think depending on how you weigh the different criteria, you get different maps. So that was a long answer to that question, but I think that answers that. I was going to say one more. Oh, and one more thing I was going to mention, sorry, if I may, just as far as trying to get a sense of where things are in this, I think we've had these maps have been up there. The interactive map link, which I think has been on the website as well, that actually will offer you aerial views, which is a little bit easier sometimes to see. And I think the school locations are now on there, but I could be wrong. But the aerial view helps, I think, to kind of orientate yourself sometimes with the map. So anyway, I'm sorry if that was a very long answer. But
No, thank you. Trustee Wong has a comment.
Just a comment, a point of clarification about, wanted to clarify that it was not per the direction of the board. It was the expertise of the demographer to use residential addresses to address that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet point. So it was not per our direction. It was just their history and what their assumptions were going into drawing the maps. It was not per our direction.
Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you, and we are now closing.
Thank you.
Public hearing number 2. We'll move on to information discussion items, and there are no information discussion items this evening. Now move on. Sorry, got to get some water here. To action items. P1, approval of recommended and individuals to join the Community Advisory Committee, CAC, for the 2018-2019 school year, education services. Turn to page 1.
Good evening, President Alcala, board members, Superintendent Luna, and Cabinet. I'm Sue Massey Clover, Director of Special Services, and tonight I'm bringing forward 4 candidates for the Community Advisory Committee for the Yolo County Special Education Local Plan Area. As a district the size we are, along with Woodland and Davis, we're entitled to 4 members, 2 parents, and 2 educators. The first candidate could not be here this evening, but you know her as Deborah Abraham. She's a parent of a student at River City High School and has been on the CAC for years and is continuing to serve. The other candidates I'm bringing forward are Marcia Okada. She's the teacher at the Traditional Adult Living Program, and this is his 2nd year that we're requesting she be on the board as the educator. Martha Hansen as our parent, and myself as the other educator. So.
Okay, thank you. So may I get a motion to approve? Thank you. A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously
Thank you.
approved. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had a P1.
We had a P1.
So Pat, did you want to
I'm
speak on
so
this?
sorry, Pat. We did
You
have an
you did not want to speak on this.
All right, thank you. Okay, let me check. Is there another one? Does she have another number?
Yes,
No?
she does.
Okay, all right. All right, very good. Moving on to P2, approval of preschool instructional calendar 2018-2019. Amber Lee, Assistant Superintendent, Education Services.
Good evening again, Board of Trustees. The Educational Services Department requests the approval of the preschool instructional calendar for the 2018-19 school year. And I just want to take a moment to state that normally we bring this to the board for approval in June, before the start of the new school year. However, this year, with the restructuring of our preschool, we had to wait until licensing completed their process so we could bring this for approval. And they completed it literally, excuse me, they completed it literally at 5 o'clock the night before school started. And so I want to really give a shout out to our MOT department and to Kendra Reynolds, our Director of Early Childhood, and the whole entire preschool staff who worked tirelessly and overtime and went above and beyond to make sure that 4 sites were licensed. And I also just want to inform the board and the public on record that all of our students who wanted a full-day program were able to find a full-day program. And I especially want to thank, well, he left, but I want to thank Yolo County Office of Education because they really worked to,
They're there. He's outside.
oh, he's outside.
Justice
They really
Salinas.
worked to make sure collaboratively that all of our families had a home in West Sacramento or in the county. So our preschool is off to a great start. There's positive, happy staff and students. So at this time, we request approval of the preschool instructional calendar for the 2018-19 school year.
Thank you. You have a motion?
I move.
Second?
I'll second.
All in
With a
fa-
comment, but I'm going to make a
of
quick
course, I'm
comment.
sorry.
Thanks, guys. I just talked to a family who moved here, just moved to West Capitol and is going to Westfield Preschool and said nothing but good things and how welcoming and wonderful it was. And I know that I'm a little nervous about half-day program versus full-day, but I'm so excited that I've only heard positive things from our families and the support they feel. So that's an enthusiastic second.
Thank you so much. I believe we had a second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye, unanimously approved. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we will now move on to P3, adoption of resolution number 1819-07, sufficiency of instructional material, Williams Act, Amber Lee, Assistant Superintendent, Educational Services.
Well, hello again. So administration staff have confirmed that all schools have sufficient instructional materials and therefore respectfully request the approval of Resolution 1819-07 regarding sufficiency of instructional materials.
I move.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to leave it open.
Right, so,
Well, there are 3 of us.
very good. Thank you. Approved. P4, approval of resolution number 181906, adopting the 2018-19 revised GAN limits and 2019-20 GAN limits. Chris Mount Benitez, Chief Business Official. Roll call vote. This is going to be a roll call vote.
Oh, P3 is a roll call vote. Sorry, P3 was a roll call vote, so we need to.
So I'm sorry. P3 was roll call. Kobe is now back, so we will have to redo that one. Chris, I'm going to ask just to hold for a second.
Go ahead.
P3, adoption of resolution 181907, sufficiency of instructional materials, Williams Act. We had a motion, a second, and this is roll call vote. Sarah Kirby Gonzalez.
Aye.
Jackie Wong.
Aye.
Kobe Pizzati.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Thank you. This is also a roll call vote. Approval of Resolution 181906, adoption of 2018-19 revised GAN limits on 2019-20 GAN limits. Chris Mount Benitez, our Chief Business Official. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees and colleagues and community members. I have two items this evening requiring action and approval, P4 and P5. We'll start with P4, which is the approval of the resolution of the annual GAN limit. The way that our district has done this in the past is we actually establish it for the upcoming year, and then we revise it after we get in the current revenue numbers. The GAN limit goes back to 1979 with excuse me, Prop 13, and it basically limited the amount of local revenues that could be collected as taxes. This is largely a pro forma vote. We are required to still do the calculation, although it has nothing to do with our revenues any longer. It is just a law that continues to stay on the books. So the GAN limit for 18-19 and for 19-20 is established at $53,162,037.
Okay, very good. May I get a motion?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote. Sarah Kirby Gonzalez.
Aye.
Jackie Wong.
Aye.
Kobe Pizzati.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Unanimously approved. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
We will now move to P5, approval of unaudited actuals financial report for fiscal year 2017-28. Chris Mount Benitez. This presentation is in your packet, everyone. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Everybody should have a copy of the unaudited actuals report. This is the second to last report on last year's budget and financial statements that we'll be presenting. Of course, the last one is the actual audit findings. So what the unaudited actuals shows you is what we budgeted and believed we were going to be spending versus what we in actuality did spend. And so it's a fairly straightforward presentation. You'll see in the presentation, once we can get it to pop up. 1 second. I can only, the presentation itself is only about 2 minutes, so there's only so long I can stretch. But you'll see in the presentation when it comes up that the majority of our expenditures, with very few exceptions, are under 1% of a differentiation, or what we call a variance from what's budgeted, which means that we stay very much on line with our budget throughout the year and what's adopted by the board during the initial adoption as well as first and second interim. That's as much as I can stretch, I swear.
Does anyone have?
I mean, I've got it on my computer, so I can
Right.
see what you're
I was going to
saying.
say,
We have it here.
I do as well. I can do it verbally with you if you'd prefer.
That's fine, please.
Yeah, why don't you just go
Okay.
ahead.
You got it?
You get?
Oh,
there you go.
There we go.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. It really was as much as I could stretch. So at any given time, of course, we're working in 3 different fiscal years. We're always working to close and actualize the prior fiscal year, which is what you're seeing this evening, our unaudited version of that. We're managing the current year, and we're preparing the budget for the subsequent fiscal year. A lot of people would say, what do you mean you're working on next year? It's a little too early. It's actually not. We're in the weeds on next year already, so we will have that coming at you fast and furious in the winter. The summary of the report is the total revenues and expenditures for all funds in the district. A variance based on a 1% benchmark to estimated actuals. In other words, we try to always be within 1% unless we have a really good reason. A 1% fluctuation, actually even a 2 or 3%, depending upon the size of the district, is considered relatively normal. But we want to have an explanation anytime that there is a variance or a fluctuation from what we had planned. At nearly $78.3 million, including contributions, 1% for the sake of this report is about $780,000. So you can see on the general fund that there are very few variances of note. In actuality, what you have is that you can see that the estimated actuals, and can be a little bit confusing. So if you look at total revenue and expenditures, it looks like we have far more revenue than expenditures, but then you see the other net, which is in parentheses, indicating a negative figure of we budgeted for $10.4 million. It was actually 10.6. Those are what we call contributions from the general fund to other areas that we need to contribute to keep supported. And we actually have a list of those for you this evening so that you can see specifically what those are, so that you can see the total net change to fund balance. Always that figure I like to highlight is we spent about $5 million more last year than we took in revenues. So we operated at a deficit last year of about $5 million. This was a planned deficit. In fact, our deficit wasn't as bad as we planned. You always got to find the silver lining, right? So we planned a deficit of about $5.6 million, and it came in around $5 million. So we did a little better than we had planned for. The contributions, so the $10 million contribution always sticks out when you look at unaudited actuals, and so I like to break it down to make sure that everybody is very familiar with where those contributions are going to from the general fund. The largest one, of course, is that first line up there, and that's our contribution to special education. Special education funding is, and I always provide the warning, this is an opinion, of course, although it's substantiated by a lot of facts. It's woefully underfunded. And so the amount of specific restricted special education funding that we get goes nowhere close to meeting the actual expense need of the district. And so the first contribution, the largest one, is that $6.35 million that you see at the top that we contributed from the general fund to special education activities. It was actually about $140,000 less than we had planned at the budget adoption. RRM, that's our routine restricted maintenance. That's also required by law. We contribute 3%. To RRM, I'm a little mumbly this evening, and that is specifically for the maintenance of the facilities of the school district. So that is a large part of my maintenance and operations department, district-wide. The next three, all these acronyms, I don't like these acronyms because the first one is CREB, which doesn't sound so bad. The second one is actually pronounced QSCAB, which I always sort of think sounds a little yucky, but, and then the 2014 COPs, those are all debt service payment. That might be a little surprising to folks. The total of those three numbers is over 800,000. And actually all three of those go to pay for various COP and debt activity that the district took on internally, and those three items all were either to build the comprehensive high school or some of the solar projects, one of which was associated with the comprehensive high school and one of which was not. So why is that in the general fund, especially with all the presentations that were given this last year saying that we had promised our developer fees to paying those payments? I see you nodding. That's why I'm addressing it, because I knew that question would come up. And that's because the actual payments, I always refer to it, I always put everything in household income terms or budget terms. The mortgage payment that we planned for is coming in a lot higher than was planned for. And so anything that goes above what we get in developer fee income, we have to take out of the general fund. And I know that's not the intent. The general fund is intended to provide financing for the education of our students. However, we sign the mortgage note. So when we don't get enough in developer fees, it comes out of the general fund. Okay, so that means our total contributions this year, we had planned on $9.72 million. It came in at almost $9.8 million. The other contributions that you see listed below, much smaller numbers, but still ones I just wanted to show you to make up the difference of the totals that I showed in contributions. Transportation, we get a little bit of regional transportation money, but most of the transportation department, we do run it under its own restricted object code, is about $2.5 million to run the transportation department. You can see that Fund 13 has two lines. That can confuse some folks. One of those is related to board policy, which is why I gave it two lines. Fund 13, unpaid lunches. The board decided some time ago that instead of having the nutrition services program try to operate at an annual deficit for community members that weren't able to or did not pay their lunch bills annually, that the board would backfill that after a certain period of time. So the lapsed payments that the board is covering for this past year is about $78,000. And then you'll see additional Fund 13 contributions. The majority of the Fund 13 contributions for this past year were for raises and associated benefits for the employees that work in our nutrition services department. You might think that that looks like a lot. I want to highlight something here really quickly because I looked into this quite a bit after seeing this. Nutrition services, as you all know, runs a little bit on a shoestring. The amount of money that they get to provide all of our children with meals at an affordable price is pretty tight, to say the least. This contribution is after they contribute 4.5% of their entire revenues to the district, which totals over $250,000. So they already contributed, and that pays for administrative costs like running their payroll and for me signing all their contracts and managing the department. So they contributed $250,000, and the school district had to contribute about $160,000 of it back. Okay? So they are still contributing, which is actually somewhat unusual for a district of our size. Anything else that really stands out? Not much. Everything else looks pretty much in line. That's about it. That last slide went a little quickly. That was restricted, again, all within 1% variance.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We do have one public comment from Don Stauffer.
Hello again. I remember specifically the bonds that were subsidized. These came out of the Obama era legislation for relief during the recession. And CREB and QSCAB came out of those, and they were competitive grants that the district got for installing solar. And I remember at least when this first happened, which I believe was 7-8 years ago, Scott Landsberger, our CBO at the time, was able to show us some figures about how the energy savings was actually paying the debt service. And it would be great if we could have something that actually would show how much the systems are contributing to our energy savings in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. This board, wish to make any comments, Mr. Pizzotti?
Yeah, I've got a comment. Chris, if you come back up for a second. You obviously got an idea of what my question might be. It has to deal with debt service. And it's clear that we're going to have some kind of study session to figure out, where we're going to make some kind of adjustments in order to make up for this debt service, because that's a big chunk of revenue that's going to come out of our general fund. Is there a way that you can think of where we might be able to renegotiate certain redeveloper fees or anything of that nature that we can maybe discuss with the city or something of that nature? Or maybe now is not the time, but I'm just suggesting $831,375 is a lot of money to be coming out of our general fund for something that's not accounted for or we haven't budgeted for based on debt service, right?
Right. There's a lot of ways to do finance, just like all of us manage our household budgets.
Right.
At the time that developer fees, and there's 3 different levels of developer fees, 1 through 3, we're at the lowest level. We're at level 1 because that was established 20 years ago. That was actually before a lot of the development really started occurring in West Sacramento to the degree that it has, and it's been locked there. So we can't influence the amount that we get. Okay. The other idea is that the developer fees were used essentially as collateral to get financial institutions to lend us the money to do all that work without going to the public for a bond, which would have been more traditional. There's a couple of so you always have trade-offs, right? Opportunity cost, not to get all wonky, but so the opportunity cost of doing that, though, there's 2 of them. Number 1 is developer fees ebb and flow with the economy, right? So we've really seen them ramp up in West Sacramento over the last 15 years, but they're pretty much at their height until we see some new big developments go in. So when they sort of ebb and flow with the economy, there are going to be years that they don't cover the total mortgage bill, which means we have to take out that money from other places. The board just refinanced all of those COPs last November, so there is no further room for refinancing at this point. The mortgage cannot be refinanced any further. The other opportunity cost is that the developer fees are not just meant to build schools. They're supposed to be taking care of all the district maintenance that is not covered by the RRM contribution, that 3% annually. The RRM is just, and I say because it's a department I supervise that I'm very fond of, my maintenance and my operations and my custodians and my groundskeepers, that's RRM. The developer fees are also supposed to pay for example, if we need to put in some new portables, or if we have a project that we can't fit into the budget that just happens that maybe insurance doesn't cover. Because we've guaranteed all of that income to paying off our debt service, we actually don't have that flexibility any longer. And actually, we don't even have any more flexibility to get any more COPs. Because as you can see, when the economy hasn't gone down this year, but when we have fewer developer fees, we can't even meet our payments without dipping into the general fund. So to say that the household budget is really squeaky tight right now is a little bit of an understatement.
So you're suggesting that if there's more development, then there could be additional revenues that could come in?
Yes. So for example, I heard somebody say there's 6,000 homes approved to go into the south end of the district. Actually, there's 10.
Right.
Because I've been nosy and I can't help myself. The problem is that we didn't put any mitigation agreements in place. So those 10,000 homes have been approved, and those 10,000 homes will generate less than a third of what it would cost to build one of the two schools to serve the number of students that will generate. So because we've used our internal resources and leveraged them, to build what we have now and don't have any more leverage point, and our developer fees aren't high enough, if all of those homes went in really quickly, we could find ourselves in a position that would be pretty untenable for the school district with no solutions, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I would just like to reiterate what
Chris,
Board Trustee Vasati said, and that is delving deeper into some of these pieces, because we know that we cringe every time we see building go in. I've considered, do we go put big signs that say we are full, in front of some of our schools, like other districts have done, because we just want to make sure that we are very open with the community and that we are working very closely. And this has been said in a lot of 2x2s for a lot of years with the city, is we need to know and we need to partner on these pieces. So I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm really glad that your honesty and digging this up for us and having a new lens to share with us. And I would like to have more time together to go through it.
Absolutely, anytime.
Will this be covered at the facilities study session? That's in our future.
We have two study sessions right now. One calendared. Facilities is October 17th, if my numbers are correct in my head. And then I also have scheduled that there was requested a budget study session, which we then need to schedule for sometime in November, December, or January. They're related, so we'll hear about it more than maybe not more than you want to, but we'll hear about it a lot.
Good.
And so please give me any additional questions or questions that you're hearing from the community, because the more time I have to dig in and research, the more I find and the more accurate I can be.
Just for transparency, I wanted the public to know that we're having those study sessions already scheduled in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Any more comments? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to get a motion?
Yes.
Yes.
I move.
Okay, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Also vote aye, unanimously approved. Thank you,
Thank you.
Chris. Okay, we now go to board governance. Q1, action item, adoption of resolution. Here we go, adoption of resolution 181908, adoption trustee area boundaries and elections sequence for Board of Trustee elections. The board will need to take action to adopt a map to move forward on this process. on Bay Area by area trustee elections. Mr. Tunick?
Thank you. Once again, so as I mentioned previously during the public hearing presentation, that the board has gone through 6 public hearings on this, and at the end of that process, in order to move forward with the trustee areas and to adopt or to select a boundary area map, that you have Resolution 181908, which is before you tonight. It's pretty straightforward. What it will do is it would formalize the proposal of one of the maps. So you'll notice on the resolution there's a blank to fill in which map the board ultimately selects, which of the 4 colors. It would also direct that the election sequence that goes with that map would be adopted at the same time, so that those 2 things go together. The other things that I wanted to mention, just to be clear about it, is that, and the resolution states this, that this has no impact on the current terms of current board members. This, if it were to be adopted by the board, the transition process actually happens as those seats come up. So it actually takes 2 full elections in order for the transition to occur. Nothing changes overnight, as it may be. It obviously would come into effect after the upcoming November 2018 elections. We're obviously much too close at this point for any changes to be made to those. The ballots are out. And then the last thing, because it came up previously, was there is a provision in there indicating that the board will later consider a resolution as far as a waiver to the State Board of Education. That would be a separate action that's not on the agenda for this evening. Although I would mention if that's something the board would like to see placed on the agenda, I think that would be an appropriate thing to ask or to request at this meeting, so that could happen at a future meeting. So with that, I don't know, I did want to mention too, we have the demographer, Dr. Justin Levitt with National Demographics is also available if there's any questions about the maps tonight. And unfortunately, the City Council apparently also uses the phone up to the microphone method, so I will be doing that. I think it's sort of worked before, but if there's any questions, we can ask him to weigh in. And of course, I'm available to answer questions as well.
Okay, we do have 1 public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, 4 public comments. Thank you. Okay, we'll begin with Pat Flint.
You already said
No.
yours. Oh, sorry.
Danny Langford.
She left, okay?
Danny Langford.
Okay, thank you. Danny Langford.
I would request that you not vote on a map tonight, being that the yellow map just came out a week ago, maybe. I think that the community hasn't had enough time to actually be able to discuss this, being that all of your meetings have not included that. And again, I express concern over the fact that we are paying for 4 in-person demographer guys to be at our meetings. Sorry, I can't think right now. So that is in person, again, not on a little phone, not a phone held up to the microphone. We pay for it. But I do think that we need to wait and give the community an opportunity to discuss the yellow map. Thank you.
Okay, Laura Jameson. Okay, Laura, thank you. And Irene Eklund. Irene, okay, all right. Well, is that a? It's discussion. So we will have discussion now. There we begin. Well, we've had many hearings, and I have to tell you personally, I like the yellow map. However, we have had a lot of input from the public, and most of the input that we got at the meetings we had seemed to favor the green map. I would be okay with that map too.
I was the one who requested the yellow map at the last hearing, and I agree that it's only been around about a week, and the community just needs to digest it a little bit more, just because it took a long time for people to understand the other 3 maps, and so I think that would be fair, and I don't know, I mean, there's consequences to kind of extending it out, a timeline out, but just something that's been weighing on my mind since we actually just introduced it last week, and haven't kind of been able to showcase it entirely. With that, yeah, I don't know.
Do you or?
Oh, let's go with Sarah Kirby Gonzalez, and then we'll go with Mr. Pizzotti.
Okay. So one of these conversations, and I've spoken a lot about this publicly over the last few years, actually, but feels very uncomfortable us having this conversation. And then when people ask us, well, how are you having this map drawn? We did not give direction of how these maps would look, or we saw the maps when everybody in the public saw the maps. So we all saw them at the same time. Just to be very clear on that, we didn't know what they would look like. I do understand why maps are drawn with the people who have been elected in place, because so I'm going to throw this caveat out there, because I feel very uncomfortable with, well, let me ask, how many comments have we received online? How many different people have commented online on the maps? Superintendent Linda Luna.
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez, we have had 7 responses to our maps available on our website. Out of those 7 comments, it includes 4 people.
Okay. So we've had 4 people who've given comments on those maps. And so my only feeling with this board or myself making a decision of taking somebody off of the board, which would one of these maps would do in terms of putting 2 trustees in the same area, is, and all of these maps affect me the same way personally, so it's not about that. But Trustee Wong had 9,000 votes in the last election. And so I don't feel appropriate making a decision about my board colleagues when thousands of people voted for every single one of us up here. We have every precinct, everyone who has won a precinct has gotten a seat on the board. And so I feel uncomfortable making a decision to vote on a map, no matter who the 2 people are that are together, because I feel like it goes against the wishes of the community, and I just feel uncomfortable having that come from me. If it came from the community, that would be different. So I have to make that caveat. I also heard loud and clear about having multiple trustees in the same school, and it was commented tonight that, you know, your neighborhood needs to hold you accountable, and you're accountable to your own neighborhood. And so I just want to share what I've shared before, which is my fear of unintended consequences. And this board has worked very hard to ensure that we have equity across our district. We have different needs at different school sites. And there have been times, and I often have said this before, I don't say what school my daughter goes to often. I mean, I'm happy to tell you, but because I don't want a perception, though, in this board meeting that I favor one school over another. I really want to show that I'm equitable to every single school. I feel that I am here for every single school and every single person. So my fear about this idea that you are, that I just want to share with you is that there are times where I'm going to make decisions, and I have many times in this room, to divert resources from maybe a neighborhood school to one that has more need. And so I want to share that with everyone in here so you understand one of those challenges. I hope that whoever is on this board for years and years to come will always look at the entire district, will always, and what every child needs, especially our children who are coming from more disadvantaged homes, because they deserve to have more resources. And so I have to share my feelings on that. I feel uncomfortable with a map that puts 3 trustees, possibly. I mean, we don't know where somebody could live. This is very arbitrary, right? I could live on this side of the line or that side of the line tomorrow. So it feels a little bit arbitrary. But the idea that one school, that Bridgeway Island, could have 3, potentially 3 parents at that school who are on the board, I feel like that sets up for some inequity. So I feel uncomfortable with a map. I feel uncomfortable with a map that puts 3 trustees there, because I don't feel like it does the purpose of why we're here. So my feelings on those, looking at this, would be in favor of the green map for those reasons. And so just to be very honest and transparent with what I'm feeling, and happy to have more discussion on any of those issues.
Okay, Trustee Pizzotti.
Sure. So I'm uncomfortable with this process to begin with, but I voted no early on, not for the reasons of not wanting to do district elections. It was for the reason that we're going to do this in 2022 anyway. So we're going to use 2010 census data to draw maps, actually 3 boundaries, because there's only going to be 3 elections in 2020. So we're going to use 2010 census data to draw 3 maps, or 3 boundaries in 2020. Take 2020 census data in 2 years and draw new maps again. So I'm uncomfortable with that process. I would want to do it just once, and that would be my preference. I don't, that was my reason for my objection to this. However, with that said, that's not what's before us now. Now we have, maps before us, we have to make a decision. The time has come for us to make that decision. And I concur largely with what Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez said. None of us saw or even asked for these maps to be drawn in the way that they were. We had no input on them whatsoever. And so it makes me, a little uncomfortable to go forward with these maps, having added, new information that has actually come from the board that would put, 2 trustees in an area together. I don't think that's what was intended. I don't think that's what the intent was when the potential litigants came forward with their letter with the potential threat to sue. So it's my opinion, and I've been to two, I guess, what were they, forums? 2 forums. And in each case, the green map was the clear favorite. The first forum, the map wasn't out yet, but we received input at that first forum that they wanted something to look much like the green map. So I've heard nothing really to counter the argument, or to counter the selection of the green map thus far. And so I think with that, I mean, I've been to 2 forums and 2 PTO meetings, and the general consensus is, since we have to make a choice on this, I'll go ahead and make a motion for the green map.
Okay, do I get a second? I will second that.
Okay.
We have to have a roll call vote. Any discussion, I'm sorry.
We have some
Any
discussion.
discussion, I'm
I was
sorry.
like, yeah, no.
I'm sorry,
no,
apologies.
no, that's
We just
okay.
have a motion and a second. You can still have discussion.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I hear you. Again, the yellow map has been out there for just a little bit. Again, you guys know that I'm a policy person where I live, and for transparency, it puts me and Trustee Pizzotti in the same, the yellow map, so it is absolutely uncomfortable, right? But I think that on policy, it makes sense to, in kind of a true vacuum, not to include our residences, right? So just on pure policy and drawing a pure map with intention of CVRA. I get that, like, and what I used to say in Central Valley, you draw these maps based on just without, the incumbents' addresses in place. So the yellow map is one that would technically be similar to that process, right? And so, yes, it's uncomfortable to say, well, I have a fellow colleague that we're drawn into a map, but from policy, yellow makes a lot more sense to me. But I also hear the imbalance, and I think I've said it, is that we lean towards the south already. And to have 3 trustees represent 1 school, it also is uncomfortable. So again, we've only had this map for a week, wondering whether or not we could extend it, I don't know, extend more discussion and talk to the demographer about, like, can you, kind of shift it, shift the map, the yellow map to have, or another map, make it I don't know, what color next? Rainbow map next, I don't know. That would include a kind of a more differential balance to the center or to Westmore Oaks neighborhood, right, where there aren't 3 in Bridgeway. So just a thought. Again, we've only been living with this map for a week. I just feel that there needs to be more discussion and digestion of the yellow map, given everything else that we just discussed right now. That's just my opinion, but you all can make a motion, it's just, I just still feel uncomfortable not having had this map out there as long as the other maps.
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez?
Do you want to ask your question to the demographer?
Yeah, I asked, so I thought he was gonna pick up the phone but he has no legs on a phone.
I apologize for that. And just to clarify on the phone point, the district is not paying for the in-person appearances when they're not actually in person. So just to clarify on that. But anyway, Dr. Levitt, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, and I believe the question was if the board wanted to direct a further variation on the yellow map I think it was to try to keep.
To limit the Bridgeway school representation to 2, I guess.
Can you hear that?
The direction seems to be to keep Bridgeway in a maximum of 2 trustee areas.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what the green map does.
And maybe the first question is just from a population and other legal criteria point of view, is that even possible?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, essentially what that would require is dividing the Southport area into 3. So that would, like a larger chunk of the Southport in trustee area 3. Instead, it would have to divide that neighborhood, the main triangle in Southport, south of Thorpe Road. But that's what we'd be looking at doing in order to put as much of the Bridgeway population into trustee areas 4 and 5. It's the odd shape of Bridgeway that's the real issue. The way that it kind of follows the canal around, and so that's where we would have to play with that a little bit. Area 5, is basically, it keeps the Asian American community together, and we want to avoid dividing that as much as possible. But we could certainly play around with the boundary between 3 and 4.
Yeah. And for transparency, the green map also has Bridgeway with 3 representatives.
Mm-hmm.
The green map doesn't?
No, it doesn't.
No, there are only 2.
There's only 2 in.
Can we get the?
Isn't this 4?
Get the presentation back up. Can we get the presentation back up? Yeah, the one with the maps. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially it's the area between the canal and Thorpe Road in the green map that's in that's the only part in trustee area 4.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
And the green map, the issue, that people had talked about was that little cutaway, but that is a school boundary line that has that cut right there. And so the green map was following that school boundary piece.
But again, so my motion is to give it a more time, but I mean, unless the board really is compelled to vote tonight.
We do have a second on the first motion.
Yeah, you have a first and a second, so you.
Yes.
Do you have, I want to move on for me, do you have any more comments or discussion? Because I just want to make sure that, I don't want to rush through a board colleague if they have any other pieces.
No, I mean, that was just that was my question to the wrong, if it was possible, but if it's the direction of the board to actually vote on one tonight, then it's a moot point for me to ask for more time for the public to digest the yellow map.
And the yellow map was presented at the last, I wasn't there because of the Brown Act, so at the last forum?
Last Wednesday.
And were you there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
With 2 people.
Oh, with
from the
2
public.
people? And how many comments did we have regarding this map online?
0. See.
Okay.
That's not true because I did comment online.
Oh, 1.
In favor of the yellow map. I got a response from the district.
Okay.
Thank you for
Okay.
that clarification.
Okay.
0 comments, 1.
Or 0 questions?
Yeah.
0 questions, 1
0
comment.
questions, 1 comment. Thank you.
Okay, 1 support, okay.
All right. Is there any further discussion?
I mean, I I would be, typically, I would be in favor of waiting and having more time, but I've been very transparent about how I don't feel comfortable voting for a map that has any colleagues out when thousands of people voted for them, and it puts, so I mean, I just feel very uncomfortable making that decision, and I don't feel like it's correct coming from me, and I don't know if I'll feel any more comfortable later, but I'm usually in favor of having more community input, but that's where I stand as of right now.
Okay, very good. We have a motion, and it's been seconded. We will now proceed to roll call vote. Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez for the green map.
Is this a resolution?
It's
a resolution.
So the selection of the map.
It's a roll call for the selection.
For the green map?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Jackie Wong.
I abstain.
Kobe Pizzotti.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Passes. We'll now move on to item Q2. Do we have any comments? No? Okay, very good. 2018-2019 board priorities. Okay, so we will now go to, ask everyone to please go to page 84 and 85. Read our board priorities. Okay. On May 7, 2018, the Board of Trustees participated in a third special board governance session facilitated by Mike Walsh and Amy Christensen. The following discussions were held between the trustees to determine the board's priorities and goals moving forward. Guidelines for the board. Develop organizational priorities, effective structure, and systems. Focus on students. Develop exemplary leadership. Focus on board guidelines will help the new district community brand. Protocols. What we do in between meetings. Goals. What we focus on during the meetings. Positive advocacy. Communication and advocating of students. Agreed upon board protocols. Constant contact is to be used by district messaging with board consensus of board messages. Board member complaints. If a complaint is received regarding board member behavior, the superintendent will take the information to the president to address individually. Relationship of the board. The board president deals with the board members' issues related to board governance. The board president will seek advice from the district's legal counsel if concerns, complaints continue. Agreed upon board goals. Conditions of learning. Develop a long-term plan that focuses on 5-year blocks of time that align standards, technology, and facilities in an equitable fashion that addresses student needs. Pupil outcomes. Create a college and career culture of equity and access to strategically meet the educational needs of students, as demonstrated by metrics which will be determined by staff and reported back to the board for acceptance and inclusion in the goal. Engagement. Create a school climate that engages the cultural diversity of our staff, students, families, and partners to feel safe, welcome, knowledgeable of services and opportunities for all students. Goals. Community, promoting family involvement, strong partnerships, and school pride. Culture of innovation, responsive to student needs and aspirations. High quality, reflective, and adaptive educators. Engaging learning experiences in safe, positive environment. Challenge and support each student to develop critical thinking, problem solving, and communication skills. May we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
A second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye also. Unanimously approved. We'll now move on to Q3, 2018-19 Superintendent Goals. Linda C. Luna, Superintendent.
Thank you, President Alcala, Board of Trustees. This evening, I bring forward a draft of goals to bring to the boards for focus areas of my specific work this year. But before I do that, let me bring to you the board priorities that you just adopted. So in terms of the priorities, you have it under the 3 categories of the 8 state priorities of which all school districts are focused on: the conditions of learning, pupil outcomes, and engagement, specifically from the board based on the priorities that you just adopted and also the discussions that happened on that May 7th governance session. Specifically for the conditions of learning, what you're requesting is our work for 5-year plans specifically for 3 areas, and that's standards alignment and implementation, technology, and facilities. In terms of people outcomes, it's very broad, and you've asked for metrics, and so our staff now will begin to work on the metrics, looking at the LCAP goals that already have metrics in place to ensure that they meet those areas of a college and career culture based on equity. In terms of engagement, you've asked us to really look at school climate in terms of the diversity of culture and also the climate of how our families and stakeholders feel being at our schools. As a reminder for our LCAP, our Local Control Accountability Plan, in what way do these 5 areas of our LCAP that were established many years ago and are ongoing and revised each year by the board and aligned to all of our funding, in what way does the LCAP align to the board priorities and vice versa? So you'll see there they're very aligned and they're very strategic and they're very intentional from the board. And that is the college and career readiness is our first goal in our LCAP. The second has to do with educational opportunities, which have to do with ensuring that all students have equitable access. That includes A through G requirements, programs of choice, which we have worked on the past 3 years. The third one of highly qualified teaching and learning, we are constantly engaging in meaningful training, and you heard us refer to the New Wednesday professional learning time, and we also work on recruiting those that are highly qualified. In terms of school climate, this is about our school safety, the processes that we use, and what kind of social and emotional services and staffing do we have to ensure that our climate at our schools are safe and welcoming. In terms of engagement, we're talking about parent education, such as the PK program, such as removing barriers to open up pathways for our parents to be directly involved in the education of our children. So it's very intentional. Your board priorities are actually aligned to the LCAP. So the question would be, are the superintendent goals aligned to that? For now, the board priorities become my goals. So there are 4 broad categories of which I've submitted into the board packet. The first being student achievement and academic progress. For that is what our educational system truly exists for, in order for all of our students to have a bright future. So the first one, in progress and growth, as measured by the California dashboard, now that's not the only measurement. The dashboard is a snapshot of time. It's a snapshot of what have the students learned over this period of school, from the beginning of school to that spring period of which they take an online assessment that is individualized. It's not the same for every single student. It's only a snapshot. So the second part of student achievement and academic progress is ensuring that all of our classrooms have standards-based and standard-aligned resources. Now, here I'm submitting a 3-year plan, and one would ask from the outside, why? Why would you wait 3 years? Why would we wait 3 years to ensure that every single student receives standards-based instruction and every single classroom has standards-based resources? Because I know what our reality is. Even if we dictated and said every single classroom is going to use all of our standards-based curriculum and is going to use every single units of study that our dream team has created, and that every single classroom will implement every single kind of benchmark assessment and in local assessments, it's just not quite that easy. We could dictate that, but the reality would be, in what way can our teachers be involved in this process? In what way can our teachers understand the importance of it and unpack the standards? And that's what we've chosen to do, because then that builds capacity versus dictating, as in the old times of NCLB. So we have already started this process. We've been in it for about 2 years now. So our educational services actually submitted a 5-year plan to me, and we're in our 2nd year right now of implementing the standards-based aligned resources in all of our classrooms, so that by the end of 3 years coming forward, we will be 100%. And we will be able to talk apples to apples, 3rd grade at one school, 3rd grade to another school, and look at how well our students are being monitored and making progress. The second area for my goals would be equitable access for all students. I've heard that very clearly from the board. All of our comments from the board now are really founded on ensuring all of our students have equal and equitable access to a successful future, which means that some resources will go more to another school because another school has more needs. That's equity. And so sometimes we have to really look at that. It could shift. It could shift each year. So ensuring equitable access, we have decided as an entire district that the MTSS that you have heard multiple presentations on will be our ticket to ensuring equity across our district. So just as a quick reminder, the MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, address our academic progress, and it also addresses the social, emotional, behavioral, and physical needs of our students, because we know that unless the basic needs of our students are met, they cannot move forward on that hierarchy of learning without those basic needs being met. So secondly, we also are looking at increasing opportunities for alternative and choice, because what we know is that every single student is different. And so there's more than one way to get to college. There's more than one way to have a high-paying job and a successful career. So if we only provide one way, then we're going to miss a majority of our kids, because we know that one way is not the only way. So we've opened up another high school. We have 3 high schools, a comprehensive high school, which my daughter loved because she loved the high school life. And then we have a middle college high school, which my son would have loved because he wanted to get out and also get through college sooner. And then we have YOLO High School, which is an alternative continuation school where students can have different requirements and still be on track for a diploma. So by increasing our programs and choices, it will help the equitable access. So I've heard very clearly also about after-school care. I know that the board has kind of paused on talking about that, but I need to bring to the board's attention, this is pretty high on the community's radar. Mm-hmm. It's very high in our community. And while we could sit here and discuss whether or not it's really the responsibility of K-12 education, whether it's our responsibility to provide after-school care, at this point, what really matters is that how are we best serving the needs of our families? We have charter schools that are existing in our city. And these charter schools have taken advantage of the fact that they offer free daycare. Has nothing to do with their educational programs. We have lost families because of after-school daycare. So whether we want to say that K-12 education is responsible for that or not, it's our community need right now. And so we are looking into that, and I've added that into the school unless the board directs me otherwise. I think it will go also with our looking at our kindergarten, whether we stay half-day or extend to an extended day where it's a longer day and then provide some after-school care. We are looking at expanding after-school care by looking at our agencies who give after-school care to look at it differently, to look at the licensing differently, to look at our facilities differently. So with the board's permission, we would really like to keep our families here because what we offer is about the quality of our educational programs, and now we can add to the additional needs of our families. The third category of my goals has to do with culture and climate. And when we talk about culture, what we're really talking about is not just race, not just ethnicity, but the culture is how we do our business in our organization. That's culture. And the culture also includes the relevancy of our student population and our families. Are we, as educators, providing relevant cultural instruction that is meaningful to our families of color, that is meaningful to our families of poverty, so that there's a connection? For we know what the research says about instructional connection to our students is when students then stay in school and are connected and are able to learn and feel safe. We also want to partner with CTA in terms of the unconscious bias training, because in order to be culturally relevant in our teaching and connecting to our families, we have to know what our unconscious biases are, and we all have them. Every single human being has them. But we need to know, is it affecting our teaching to our kids? Is it affecting the success of our students because of our own unconscious biases? So in terms of culture and climate, that's one area. The climate is about student safety, as we always have that as our number one priority. I would be remiss to not put that on there. We have invested with assessing the safety of every single campus, and not just school campus, but also our department campuses, to look at how can we create our facilities plans to address the safety of our campuses. So in the area of culture and climate, it's many-fold here. The cultural relevancy, the safety of our schools, the parent education so that we can reach further to our parents to bring them into the education of their children. The last categorical category for my goals is facilities, for I have absolutely no choice, nor does the board. We have to address our facilities. We have to address it twofold, for short-term and long-term. We heard a little bit from our unaudited actuals how our budget is being affected into our facilities. So what we need to look at is submitting to the board a short-term plan, which is 3 to 5 years, to address the immediate needs of not just our facilities, but it also then looks at it addresses the equity issue of the technology and the infrastructure for our schools and facilities that are not well maintained or have the infrastructure to have the technology. See, when it comes down to it, if there's absolutely no money to education and we didn't get 1 cent, the teachers need a computer, they need internet access, and that internet access better be very big and broad and fast, because our teachers need those resources when it comes down to it. And our infrastructure is not going to address that. It's too old and dilapidated in some areas. So the short-term plan has to address today, the next 3 years, and the next 5 years. For remember, building a new school at any time takes 5 years to get into place. So then the board needs to have another plan, and that's a very long-term plan. Now, San Juan Unified, put in a 20-year plan about 18 years ago or so. And they're still working on that 20-year plan. They still are opening new schools based on the planning of a 20-year plan so that they had something to work with and revise along the way. We need a more relevant 10 to 15-year plan for the board by looking at what was in place in the original facilities plan that when it was first created, whether it was back in 2012 or 2014 or 13. In order for Measure V to have been passed, you had to have had a long-term facilities plan. And the question of today, of 2018, and 10 years from now, 2028, is that plan going to be relevant in 2028? And so that's what we have to look at when we work in our facilities for this coming year. So my commitment is to ensure that the board has options and really knows. You know more now from the uncovering and unraveling of just really digging deep. You know more now than I know more now than when I walked in 2015. So our facilities and our budget conditions, especially with the state, are going to have to go hand in hand. And so we're going to meld all of that together through my goals as we bring forward the work throughout the year. So those are the 4 categories for my goals, and they're pretty hefty. I promise you no superintendent is bringing this to a board. I can promise you that. I can promise you that no superintendent, except I did know one, put a 3% increase on academic achievement across 52 schools. That's just bold. I'm trying to be bold because we have a sense of urgency here for our students of today. We can't wait. We can't wait for things to be put in place. So we've been laying layers and foundations of systems so that not just today, but in the future, our students will have a future of things in place academically, facilities-wise, and emotional supports systems in place. So those are my broad areas of goals. I have my pen here if you want to add more, or we can talk more about what you would want me to focus more on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We have some comments, questions from different board members, I believe. So Trustee Wong.
Yeah. So today, Trustee Kirby Gonzalez and I were at the CSA network, and we were just looking around thinking to ourselves, yeah, our superintendent will be in this conversation, this equity conversation with us, right? And we were excited, a little bit bragging about how you've actually taken the bull by the horns, and you're not afraid of saying that there's inequities that exist here, and that we've uncovered that. So I appreciate this plan. It's broad level, it's high level. But the other thing that we were looking at, and I'm sure it'll kind of come out as you work with staff around this, is what are the data that you are using to measure success in all of these areas, right? How are we going to know that we met progress or we're making progress, right? And just beyond test scores, and what are the other metrics out there that we're thinking of looking at? So that's what I would actually add to your goals, because I think that's how we understand whether or not we're closing that equity gap. North, south, each school, whatever it is, we just need to know and be transparent about those data so that we know that we're doing right by our kids.
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez, the chair.
I want to thank you. We have had, I think the level of evaluations that have happened over the years with you here have been very deep and very thoughtful. And I think it shows very clearly when we look across at many of the things happening. So there's more work to do, obviously. The Measure V plan, the CIP, there was very much a plan, but it was a plan to fix air conditioning, mold. It was a plan to just help get a safe environment for the children that were there right then. So it was, so we are in need now of a future plan very much. So I appreciate you looking at that. So I appreciate these pieces. The after-school piece has been a conversation that we have had since day one. And so we knew that the time it's been added slowly. There have been more places added, but I'm excited that that's tackled because it's hard to lose our kids and then get the phone calls of parents wanting to come back to our district after 2 years. And it's hard to come back sometimes depending on the school site. So these are good plans. I appreciate you, and I look forward to having more conversations about metrics and pieces in closed session as we've always done. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Pizzotti?
Yeah, I want to thank you again for bringing up probably one of my favorite topics, and that's the after-school care. That's been troubling me ever since I got on the board. I've watched as many of our kids go to either Lighthouse or Dex because they provide after-school care. That's $88 that we're losing. I mean, and it's not for any other reason than they provide after-school care. I've talked to friends of mine that live next door that said, we just can't we can't find affordable after-school care. That's the only reason why we've made that choice. And so it breaks my heart sitting on the board to hear that. I want to fight. I want to say, look, we'll figure it out. Just try and bear with us for a little bit. We'll get there. But I know you have a commitment to it. And I know we've seen movement. And we've already added, capacity in some places. We're looking to do more, but we need to do even better. And I thank you for making that a priority. I concur with Trustee Kirby Gonzalez about our facilities and you as well. We have to do something about our facilities because it is an inequity issue. Some of our children that have the most need are in the worst facilities, and that is truly an equity problem. And we need to find a way to do something about that, and I'm sure we'll have a study session about that soon. I think it's October 17th, but I want to thank you for bringing that and put it on as one of your top priorities and things to address in a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan for a short term. But we also have to look at a 10, 15, maybe a 20-year plan based on the growth of our community. So, and especially if you think about if we can provide after-school care, what is that going to do to our population? Is that going to explode our population in the people that want to come back to our schools? So we have to look down that road too. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for your diligent work on this.
Okay. Superintendent Luna, thank you. It's a comprehensive overview. I think the whole community has been concerned because we don't have the after-school programs. I mean, this really changes the dynamics. Your child's being taken care of with after-school care. It allows actually more economic mobility for many families, so this is something. I know we've also spoken about the preschool. This was a very good move to have moved many of those schools into, direct neighborhoods where these children are going to be attending schools. And I'm very happy to hear that Chris will be and has been attending many of the Planning Commission meetings and other conversations with the city. I believe that this was a component that we were missing, so I know this is part of this overview that you've given us on goals. This is going to be very, very helpful. It gives us more information and the rest of the community as well.
Can I add one thing?
Oh, and yes, please.
No, oh, sorry, wait, if you're done.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
The other thing, it was mentioned actually earlier, and I forgot about this, but the Assemblyman Thurman's bill on dual immersion programs expansion, and I know that we've spoken about it in the past, but I think that fits into student achievement and climate and access. So that's something I would hope kind of to build in those 3-year plans, because I know that Trustee Pizzotti has mentioned in the past as well. As I know, our families here also go to other school districts to have dual immersion programs that are robust in other school districts. So something that if we could integrate that would be something that I would have interest in if others were. interested in that.
We could expand that.
Thank you. And that would be under my category of educational, equitable access for all students and also the achievement.
Yeah.
Knowing that dual immersion program students, it increases their chances of the seal of biliteracy and being biliterate upon their diploma. And it just opens the gates to what they can do in college and studying abroad and the different kinds of careers that it could lead to. I would say.
And to that end, there is a grant program that CDE will be, just saying,
Thank you.
Kind of the budget issue with Chris, so there's money out there to
So
expand.
what I would say to the board is there are so many things that we would love to do in Washington Unified. And I think in having very specific categories, what I want to make sure that we do, and this includes all of my staff as I help to lead our staff in our schools, is that we can't do everything. And everything can't be important, because then nothing's important. Everything has the same weight. But what we know for sure is truly important and truly urgent, truly imperative, our moral obligation, and that is the student achievement and the success of our students upon graduation. And in our preparation for that, that's the work that we're really trying to focus on. There are a lot of distractions that happen in a school district, a lot. So in order to stay focused, what we will gently do is try to remind our community, our stakeholders, what our true coherent goals are, so that what we know is that the work that we do, we're trying ourselves to achieve and accomplish so that our students have the best chance possible in our school district. So with that, I want to thank you so much for your support. As a Board of Trustees, many superintendents aren't able to do this specific work because of the distractions that happen. And you are very focused on one thing, and that is what is best for our kids. And that, as a superintendent, I'm very proud to say for Washington Unified that at the end of the day, our Board of Trustees always makes a decision on what's right for kids. And I'm grateful and thankful.
So I move to adopt.
Okay, do I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimously passed. Thank you. We will now move on to Q4. Call for nominations for Directors at Large, Asian Pacific Islander and Hispanic. Jackie Wong.
So, hello, colleagues and trustees. This is on the agenda again. And last time I received kind of permission from the board at the time to wait till President Alcala came back, because I knew that the Latino at large was an important issue to you. After also reconsideration with CSB leadership, who asked me to apply for the API at large, I'm going to be submitting my name to the API at large. If the board
I move Jackie.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a second.
No discussion about my qualifications, what I know about education, LCFF, nothing.
I think we've read it on the website.
How I represent API communities. Well, no, nothing.
I think we're okay with that.
Okay,
Right.
good.
Okay.
Norma.
I did.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So we'll go ahead and vote.
Okay, so we got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And the second nomination is for John Gordon, who I spoke about
Yes,
last time.
you did.
So I move that to, well, can I make a motion?
Yeah, and I support it. I'll make a second on that.
And
you know his work. It's very good.
John Gordon, right?
Right, from, is it Lodi?
Galt.
Galt. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain because I don't know him or anything about him, so I'll abstain.
No, he's good. He's very good. He is Latino, even though he has the last name Gordon.
He also works on facilities, bonds issues.
Okay, all right,
So
thank
we-
you.
yeah.
So now we are at board and superintendent comments. We will begin with Sarah Kirby Gonzalez.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to share about the dual immersion program. I just talked to a family who actually made the choice not to move to Davis for their program because of our program and being very proud of the program that we have. Something that they put on the radar, which I thought was an important piece, is that we'd no longer have our outreach. I don't know if that's the official term, but the outreach specialist that came with the initial two years of that program. Yes, Yolanda. And so they were simply concerned that they want to make sure that it's still, that this program is at capacity in terms of people from all over the district, because the intent, if I'm saying this correct, when we first had the presentation, was a third of the students are native speakers, a third are exposed to Spanish, and a third are not Spanish speakers at all. And so we want to make sure that we are drawing students from all over the community, they know about it. So since we don't have that position, I thought that was an important piece that they shared, and probably maybe we can take on some of that work as board members in sharing the program. I spent the last 2 days at the California PBIS conference with a different hat, not as a school board member, but as a teacher. But and I went to one of the bias trainings, and it was done by the LA County Office of Education and on unconscious bias, and it was a really good presentation. And as we talk about these, and it's true, we all have bias, and so we can't think of it as just these folks over here are biased and no one else does. We all need to kind of look deep at who we are, and it was a good presentation. I want to make sure, though, as we have these conversations, that I really appreciate the partnership with CTA and looking into their training that they have. But our students encounter people everyone, right? Everyone at our school, the cafeteria, the school bus, our staffs are all diverse and different. So I think it's a good conversation for everyone, for our school board, and for every employee in our district to be looking at the same lens, because sometimes these conversations fall a lot on the classroom teachers, and I certainly believe that they have a very important role, but there are a lot of important people in our district to children, especially our classified staff, who make a really big difference in the lives of kids. So I just think it's important that we remember that all of our employees can make a difference in the lives of children, and it was an eye-opening training for myself. And so thank you for having those conversations. We attended the Elkhorn anti-bullying rally, and I had a great time where I pulled kids aside and talked to them about, tell me about your school and what's going on here and what's happening. And there's always a really great positivity that I have when we talk one-on-one with kids at the schools we go to. And I'll say what's going well and what could be done better. And we get a lot of good feedback from them. And I just want to give a shout out to Elkhorn, because it was really nice community, great to see them. I know there have been comments from the community about that park being open. There's some great things at that new park, one of those swings for babies on one side. But they had the gates open, and their kids were using the whole area. And so there's a reason that park is locked off during the day, because our school, our kids are using it. And so, but just as we look at how that field and how that space is used, so we can communicate that well to the community, so they understand if they want to go play on the playground, why it might be locked, and just making sure that we look at the hours so it's efficient and can be used first and foremost by our kids, and then by the community if we're not using it. And the Readcation that came to us last board meeting, which was fabulous. The teachers have a GoFundMe because they're trying to raise more books. So if you are so inclined, you can go to the GoFundMe site and look up the Readcation to support them. And maybe we can look at how we're supporting them as well as a district. And I think that those are my pieces that I have for now. So I look forward to day 2 of our CSBA equity meeting that we're going to have tomorrow, and looking forward to those conversations. It's a very diverse room of people, and so there were really good conversations that were happening that we're appreciative. But of course, we know, as was said earlier, that teachers feel like there's a lot on their shoulders right now. I know that all of staff probably feels that way right now. There's a lot on everyone's shoulders, and you're busy. And so I just want to say, this time of the year, it's hard, and I hope every member of Washington Unified is taking care of themselves and having fun when they come to work, because that's first and foremost to do a good job at your work. So this is heavy work that we're talking about. Those are big goals, and I want to make sure you feel supported in that work. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Pizzotti.
So I've been relatively busy with my day job, traveling a bit. I haven't been able to get out as much as I'd like to. But Trustee Kirby Gonzalez and I did go to Elkhorn for their best anti-bullying campaign. And I got to say, the teachers and staff and administration were, they were really getting into the rally aspect of it, as well as the students. And the students were full on cheering the teachers on as they were running with cardboard taped to their feet, through obstacle courses. It was a good program to see, the teachers interact with the children, and get the spirit lifted about the school and make it, a very positive environment. But one thing that I would like to say is that, kind of the children at that age really respond well to role models. And seeing, the teachers and the staff as role models is something great, but also being able to interact with them is also something I think really great, and that was on full display. Also, Adam Moffett from Sacramento Republic was there. He showed up, and our kids absolutely love soccer. They all knew who he was. They all wanted pictures with him, and he was very gracious with his time. He did some tricks, and of course, I would say even some board members were kind of in awe and had to get a selfie with him. So I'm not saying who that might have been. And the superintendent. And the superintendent. So anyway, he was very gracious with his time, and I would like to thank the Sacramento Republic for donating their time and energy into making sure that we had somebody from that team there to speak with the kids and motivate them about, being kind to each other and the effects of bullying and so forth. So, also, I attended a PTO meeting with Trustee Wong at Stonegate regarding the CVRA. It was just a little 15 to 20 minute, explanation. I wish we had a little more time. But it was what we could, squeeze in. We didn't want to make their PTO meeting go longer than absolutely necessary. So there was some questions. There was absolutely some blank looks on people's faces, of course. It's hard to imagine what's going on. I'm not really sure about the process. That was kind of a concern. But it was nice for us to at least have that ability to go speak with them and explain, what precipitated this, and then here's the timeline of events that we had to follow, and then go through the selection of the maps and how the maps came to be. So, and then also I attended the Bridgeway Island Fall Festival. And that's always a fantastic event. I mean, they turn out quite the crowd for that event. And I like seeing the dunk tank out there every year, and I almost got roped into it, but I had to leave to go out of town. But the Bridgeway event was, really great. I love seeing the police dog out there and the fire and how the kids interact with the police and the fire, because that's something that they get to look up to these people as role models as well. And I really love seeing how children have the opportunity to see these people, these community leaders, these police and firefighters, as not somebody who's coming to take them away or coming to lock them up, but a chance to be a role model, a good, positive influence on them. And so I really appreciated that, and I will always will. I have a special place in my heart there, and that's basically all I have.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Wong.
Thank you. I also have been traveling a lot up and down the state, talking to various school districts and county offices of education about the data dashboard and how to utilize those data. I think it's hard and it's uncomfortable for most. It's not necessarily comfortable for us either, but it was, at least for students in foster care, it's really, really important to dig down deep as to the why and understand that the data is an opportunity to plan. And it's not the end-all, be-all, but we need to kind of look at the data again, as I say, to better close that achievement gap, which is our responsibility to the students, and that's just what I preach all around the state. And I share that because everyone's having a hard time understanding their responsibility to it, and understanding how do you really move that needle in a really meaningful way, and honoring the work of support staff and teachers in those classrooms, right? It's a hard thing to do, but I think talking about it is a first step, and kind of planning it out the way that Superintendent Luna has over the next 3 years is how we will get there, because if you don't talk about it, you're not going to get there. So yeah, I appreciate the Stonegate PTO conversation and the CVRA forum. They run a very tight ship at Stonegate. So I kept saying, okay, how many minutes left? How many minutes left? So can appreciate that. But I also wanted to acknowledge, I missed actually the back to school night for our Washington Middle College. And I wanted to acknowledge the work of Principal O'Neill, and a little bit bummed that we missed that back to school night. But what I've heard back from the parents there, I think one parent today was like, he actually knows my name. He knows my student. He knows, so that was really, and this parent was just really amazed that he knew who his student was and what he was doing. So I appreciate the work that Washington Middle College is doing there. I know that we don't highlight them a lot, and they had a kind of a late start, but I've been trying to kind of tell people about the really kind of alternative to comprehensive school, and it might work for students in high school who want smaller communities. So I've spoken to a couple of parents who may be considering it just for the environment. So I wanted to acknowledge that, and so that's it for me.
Thank you. And last week, I attended on September 14th and 15th. I received a scholarship from NALEO. It's the Policy Institute on Emergency Preparedness and Response Management. I'm really happy that I attended because we had policymakers, people from school boards across the nation, assembly members, senators. We all spoke about emergency response. And we have a wonderful plan here, you know, at WSD for emergencies. But one of the most critical things that I think I heard over there is sometimes there's a lack of coordination between school districts and cities and federal programs. We had people there who had been involved in the different hurricanes, Katrina and Sandy, and often the communities were unprepared because they hadn't done a lot of pre-planning. What they gave us in those 2 days that I attended was a wonderful overview of partnerships, preparedness plans. One of the things that really they stressed was the importance of drills in community, how to prepare for drills. Now, I know that we do that when we have fire drills in schools and all, but this has to be really a coordinated effort, you know, with city and state officials. And we may have some programs in place, but this is an incredible program, and I actually brought some back, one for Superintendent Luna to share, and I did bring one back for Assemblymember McCarty, because these are the people who need to coordinate all these efforts. I know there's some in place, but they have an incredible new process on emergency preparedness. My week has been very busy as well. This week, I've been doing high school voter registration. Everyone knows it's my passion at the different high schools. And I wanted to thank Sona Dismangles from Yolo High School. She invites me out every year, and we had students there. And the new component to our program is we give them a little training, but it's actually up to the students now to go out there and talk about why the vote is important to them. And this really creates new leadership out there. You know, they are respected by their peers, and they're more likely to listen of why it's important to vote from a contemporary of theirs rather than someone older like me. And it was wonderful being out at some of our schools because Mayor Steinberg from Sacramento and Secretary of State Padilla have actually created competitions, some within the cities, and Secretary of State Padilla, for example, is challenging all the local colleges, all the California colleges, to register college students, and those that get the highest numbers will receive some sort of award of recognition of registering the most. So this is a wonderful form of civic engagement and competition that they're hoping to use. By the way, in the last 2 years, many of us who are involved in high school voter registration, the numbers are now at 200,000 for young people who have become engaged in civic engagement and registration. And we had a challenge from Secretary of State Padilla to make that number 500 within the next 2 years. I will be attending the Masters in Governance tomorrow and Saturday, the CSBA Masters in Governance, and I will actually be graduating. Those will be the last ones. Yes, thank you. And finally, I just want to say thank you again to our CSCA and WSTA for being such great partners with us, you know, making sure our kids are safe and educated and cared for. Thank you. And that is the end of my report. Now we will go on to superintendent's comments.
President Alcala and trustees, because I spent a lot of time on my goals, I was going to pass on my comments.
Very good, thank you.
you.
Okay, so we are now at future board agenda items. S1, Board Handbook, October 2018. S2, Student Progress on California Dashboard for 2018. S3, Facility Study Session, October 17th, 2018. S4, Budget Study Session. S5, Board Policy Review, Series 5000 and 6000, Maternity and Paternity Leave. And also a state board waiver is something I want to put on there. Anyone else want to include anything else?
I would just like to add a word to, since I had asked for the maternity, paternity, and adoption.
And adoption.
Leave.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So with that, I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you,
Aye.
everyone. Thank you. Adjourn.